companies do have, major capital requirements. These machines are not cheap.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the NYHIA network, Alex. It's a pleasure to talk to somebody that's actually running an exchange and in the process of building out a commodities exchange for the hemp industry, because people are kind of all over the place in terms of prices. They don't necessarily know where the markets are going, and they don't know where they've been at, and so it's good to have somewhere to keep track of that, and also somebody that's willing to and brave enough to try to venture into the market, since there's so many legal loopholes and legal aspects of it, and banking and all that kind of stuff is challenging. So for those that don't know you, could you give a little bit of background about yourself, and then also kind of how you are involved in the hemp industries?
No problem. I appreciate that, Aidan. I previously had worked in fertilizer and commodity trading and fertilizer for the past 5 years before joining with PanXchange in late 2018, just after the Farm Bill, coincidentally. And, we were able to kind of take. Yeah, right. And you could, we were able to kind of take some of those, some of the things I learned in fertilizer over the years. And I did a lot of stuff in South American containers, and, we dealt with different legal, not loopholes, but, different legalities of different countries and things like that. And then also I started to work in more of the commoditized side of things, where we would be doing basis trading out of Chicago, and basically whatever the price was for the month, and adding a small premium. And so these kind of concepts aren't really foreign to me. I've done them in the past, and it's pretty neat kind of being able to take that to something that, as of 3 years ago wasn't really able to do so. And now we're kind of going on a whole different roller coaster here. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I mean, I joined PanXchange right after the Farm Bill, like I was saying, to join and kind of really help our hemp team and get off the ground, and kind of get where we need to be. I will say we are still pretty far away from where we'd like to be in terms of making a liquid exchange with having a buyer every time there's one buyer for every seller and everything like that, and making a really fair, balanced market. And I think until we get there, we're still going to see these kind of market inequilibriums and things like that, where, in some places, some things go like this, and in some other places it goes like that. So kind of interesting to see where we're going to grow to.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of that note, you said making it more of a liquid market. Was that just adding more buyers and sellers to the market, so that you have, or adding more buyers to the market so that you actually are able to, when a seller goes onto the marketplace, they're able to find a buyer like that, or are there other aspects?
So I mean, it's adding buyers, yes, but it's also adding qualified good buyers. I mean, everyone hears about this like guy who knows another guy who knows another guy, and you're in a text message stream with a bunch of people you don't quite know. And our whole thing has been trying to keep a small ecosystem where, I can pick up the phone and call every single one of our members on there and ask them, hey, what's going on with this, or whatever. And there's no smoke and mirrors, so to say, of, how to deal with CBD right now. Kind of talking about the market as a whole, though, I mean, it's more important to remember, too, that a lot of this demand, pent-up demand, I like to call it, is going to come from places like hemp bedding for horses and from animal feed and stuff like this. And these out-of-the-box things that you wouldn't expect, that aren't smokable flower, that aren't CBD, etc. And I think that's where we're going to end up going a little bit more.
Yeah, so to kind of touch on that, so you originally you started with CBD or cannabinoids in general, but it was primarily CBD. And so you're moving into more of the industrial hemp. Even though it used to all be called industrial hemp, it's really industrial hemp is the fiber and grain products versus the cannabinoid products, right? So
right now, our exchange only focuses on the cannabinoids.
Gotcha. And so are you guys looking into like what would it take for that industry to be viable enough for you to get into it? Is it just that you don't have enough manpower right now to necessarily try dealing with that along with CBD and where all that's at, or are there other factors that?
Case of there needs to be some more natural evolution before you go to have an exchange. So I think right now you're still having such a early days of I work for, let's say a cottonized style textile company or an animal feed company. There's too many question marks. So we don't know if the specifications, if I'm a buyer that works for this cottonized textile company, the specifications I get from farmer A needs to be the exact ones I can get from farmer B. And once I can figure out what I need to buy, and both of those farmers can get on the same page and produce a replicatable product, then we can start looking at, okay, now I can source this a little bit more competitively. I think people now on the industrial side, as you know, as that term has kind of evolved into, have they're still kind of in a little bit of a trial and error type phase, and I think people are willing to pay up a little bit, and so to say, for that consistency of
I get it started. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's so
consistency. They'll pay, you know, whatever it takes, kind of thing.
the fiber side of things. So like, yeah, we definitely have a bit of a ways to go because I mean, while CBD or cannabinoids in general is it's somewhat complicated, primarily just due to the legal aspects of it and regulation going into that and to like making a food product and making a supplement and such. But pretty much all of that technology has been figured out because it was in the marijuana industry originally, right? And so people are able to just buy the technology already, whereas in the fiber side of things, we just have to develop the new materials. We have to bring in some kind of processing. I mean, like to even think about getting a linens factory up and running in the United States is crazy in terms of all the equipment you'd have to bring in and as you said, all the development we have to still do to like really figure that out. And so it kind of to like fall back to the cannabinoid industry, does it look like it's pretty much flushed out in terms of like how things are produced, or does it seem like there's like still R&D kind of to figure out? As you said, within like the fiber industry, we still have to work a bunch of things out, but within the cannabinoid industry, it seems like that's less the case.
I think it's less the case, but I think you still have these legislative kind of hurdles that are preventing some demand. I mean, I don't want to get up here and say, you know, the FDA tomorrow makes a positive ruling, and now we have Pepsi and Coca-Cola and everybody else buying, you know, huge volumes of distillate, and now we don't have enough to go around. I think that's why you kind of are seeing the rise of CBG being grown this year because, you know, these legislative loopholes, a lot of farmers, you know, imagine having a crop in a new state, you know, they're taking it pretty seriously in regards to THC overtures, and you have 0.5 and they tell you need to destroy everything. That doesn't really help you out in terms of getting things going, so to say. So I think, you know, growing for CBG so you don't have that risk of going hot, so to say, as much of a risk rather. You know, I think people are still very much in their mind with these legislative loopholes. I mean, even shipping, the Farm Bill is very clear in what can be transferred over state lines, and even then, you see all the time, you know, police officers that do the kind of handcuff now, ask questions later strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of in that regard, what are specific challenges that you see within the exchange, like that kind of limits how you're able to operate in the cannabinoid space?
Correct. So as it stands right now, everything, the onus is definitely between the buyer and the seller to make sure everything's correct. So that's kind of something that's removed our risk. We, again, want to make sure this thing has as much success as possible. I don't want to have any member, you know, run into any problem. And then, you know, basically, you know, another big thing too is as the laws are written today, you know, you have these intermediary products such as crude where, you know, the THC is going to be much higher than what should be allowed. But if it's going, you know, I've seen certain states like Kentucky, I saw was trying to pass a bill where these intermediary projects, as long as it's being sold from one licensee to another, then it would be okay just for that intermediary period. So basically, you know, breaking that down a little bit further, you know, if you have a plant that's grown in that's good to go, let's say 15% CBD or whatever cannabinoid, but it's compliant and it's 0% THC, you know, once that is concentrated down into the crude, you're going to see, you know, 5, 6, 7 times as much concentration in everything, and that 0.3 is going to get multiplied. That'll then be remediated out in order to, you know, be able to be compliant and go and, you know, to the CBD products that we all love. But as it stands right there, that's a little bit of a gray area, and until they kind of figure that out, that's something we're not really touching.
Do you think kind of down the line, when things are more solidified in terms of regulations, that would be something you guys would work on in terms of like knowing those quality standards and having like taking on that risk, or is that going to always kind of be on the shoulders of the buyers and sellers?
Well, a big thing for us is just the education of the people writing these laws. I mean, I think it's safe to say that just now, you know, with all of the, you know, the past 2 years of marketing of hype, etc., you're starting to see people that finally are like, oh, so you don't get high off of this kind of thing. And for that education to take that long, now to then explain to them, exactly what I just explained to you with crude and intermediary products, it may take a little bit longer as well. It's just it's important for us that everyone's, no one's getting in trouble and everyone's able to kind of follow certain laws, even if they are kind of draconian.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely a major challenge. So kind of to step back, you were saying like people are starting to produce more CBG. Yeah, that's definitely at least that's definitely the most well-known next cannabinoid kind of in the lineup. But are you noticing any other cannabinoids popping up like CBC or CBN or anything along those lines, or is it pretty much just CBG?
Especially in Denver for CBN. I am no scientist. I don't know exactly the medical benefits, nor do I want to claim any and get into that quagmire with the FDA. But I have seen some guys that there's been a renewed interest in it, I guess so to say. CBN for sure.
In terms of not making any medical claims, it's there's really so little we actually know about all these things. So there's really no claims that we can actually like confidently make to proceed to it. So yeah, so let's see here. One more. Oh yeah. So as you're bringing buyer and seller together, but how with like all the craziness of the law. I mean, as you said, even though it's legal and the bill was passed and this is laid out how like banks can deal with it and such, most people aren't really touching it. And even if maybe people have now heard about it and they kind of know about it, but it's still very unfamiliar. How are you are you guys handling the payment processing and banking, or is that again left to the buyer and seller?
So originally it was for just the buyer and the seller, and that was kind of something that we were able to pair the two of them, and then we were kind of walking them, hand in hand all the way. We are in the process now of setting up via a third party an escrow service, similar to a way if you and I were to transact as just two private businesses between each other, that's most likely how the process would go, is be via this escrow, at least for the first few. We want to be able to facilitate that, but being an exchange, there are certain rules with the FTC and some of these other kind of futures trades commissions where we aren't holding the money at all. It would be through a third party, so essentially powered by et cetera. But that's something in the works we're kind of putting the finishing touches on right now, and hope to have that going for probably by August.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, because that's definitely a challenge that everybody's facing. I mean, again, even though technically we're allowed to have all these systems in place, it's just the people are unsure about how the markets are. So, kind of to segment into there, how do you see the? I mean, if you want to touch more on the payment processing, you can.
Just one more thing I wanted to add about the payment processing is, we I can sit here and preach all we want about, we do a pretty strict vetting process. We ask for licenses. We have, a huge file on every single one of our members in the platform. We have references. We check, a bunch of different things and really do actually check those things. But I can sit here and preach on that all day long. But at the end of the day, if you are, let's say, a processor and you need to buy biomass to continue to run your facility, and there's no local supply available, you don't want to deal with a broker, so you log on to PanXchange, you put a bid out there. At the end of the day, you are buying something off the internet where you might not know. I'm here to help you out as much as I want, but a secured payment would make you feel a little bit better, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, could you expand on kind of how the credit system is set up? Like, is it based on? I was listening to a podcast with your boss talking about how you actually have the buyer, like multiple buyers or sellers will vet the buyers in terms of their credit viability and say like you are credible for somebody to purchase from. So like how beyond just getting the license, making sure they're a real business, like how do you actually kind of ensure, are you able to track their history and then kind of give them like a score or something along those lines?
It's not quite a score. It's more of we have had a few people. The main thing for us is going to be your license. The license is a big one. Your tax returns is another big one. And the third is references. So I think that's what you're kind of touching on a little bit there. we do ask for references in the hemp industry, whether that's a grower, the person that they brought their seeds or clones from, and you can kind of see that payment performance there. It could be their bank. That's an often one that I suggest to guys. Say, hey guys, if you guys are doing any banking, just give us any banker, and that should be fine. But yeah, anyone in the hemp industry that you transact with on a monetary basis, just to be able to show you may be a seller only, and this may be your customer. Either way, we just want to be able to make sure that you are who you say you are. I'm sure many people that are listening to this can attest to. There's a lot of people that are that ex-marijuana kind of type that they're still thinking they're running and gunning still a little bit, and they're not quite the business people that we're looking for in this industry, and we're trying to weed that out.
Definitely a major challenge with this industry in total and all is the aspect of like the Wild West nature of it. And there's definitely still touches of that, as you said, in the cannabinoid world, because the regulation just really isn't there. So like it's businesses can kind of walk that gray line and try to figure out how to kind of work their magic with it. So it has lots of crazy changes. And so kind of to touch on, you were saying that you wanted to mention kind of like how this next year and this year is going to kind of shape up in the industry versus like last year, and kind of if it's like, are we going to see a better year? Is the market still kind of drying up? I mean, I've seen like lots of processors talking about how they're paying a lot less money, and it hasn't quite gone to like the consumer down the line when somebody's buying a tincture or something, but it's still kind of a little crazy. So could you expand on that a little bit?
I think a couple points on that. So I think a big point on why consumer prices haven't dropped yet. I think a lot of these companies do have major capital requirements. These machines are not cheap at all. So in order to to be able to pay back the margin that you need to make per unit needs to be quite high. On the same note, prices have come down a lot. I mean, it's interesting to note that CBG seeds and clones are equally priced to what CBD seeds and clones were last year, and that biomass to seed kind of price is around the same as what it was last year for the CBD industry. So I don't know where all that CBG is going to go. I think there's a lot of people growing it this year. I don't know if there's a lot of people that quite know what it is yet. Most people's mothers and grandmas just found out what CBD is, and now you're throwing a whole nother curveball at them. I think it's just important though that the guys that it's important to stress that I think we're still going to go through a pretty hard time here. I think we're still pretty oversupplied going into the fall. But I think the companies that are doing good business are going to continue to do good business. I mean, there's been all these reports coming out about, or they did not so long ago, about just some consumer brands not putting exactly what was advertised. They would test it and the bottle would be 10 milligrams and it should have been 100 or something like that. Well, no one's going to continue to buy your product if that's going to be your business model and strategy. So I think the guys that are doing good business are making good names for themselves and have repeat loyal customers coming back on the cannabinoid side. And I think that's going to continue. I mean, the good will prevail, and good business beats out bad business every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's I was talking with a CBD processor, but he's been processing in the nutraceutical world for like 20 years, so he has the experience that needs to go into it, right? And he was saying how like probably going to have 20% of the market remaining in terms of the companies that are existing, just because as you said, there's a major oversupply of the market. Much of the stuff on the market still isn't really great quality. So it's also just a challenge for people to buy. I know so many processors that are going out of state to buy their hemp because the stuff in state just isn't quite on par, and they just didn't get the contract in place, which is definitely another big issue. People not getting contracts, which I think more and more people are kind of getting. But kind of how I kind of see the cannabinoid industry going particularly is sort of like maple syrup, or or in terms of, you have like the really big brands from like Vermont and Canada, and that's like all over the country, and then you have all the boutique brands that if you go into like the local shop, you'll get the local stuff, right? Because a lot of this is just, it's knowing how to scale up and knowing what it takes to scale up, because scaling up is like you can definitely have a lab set up and you can produce a good amount of stuff and have a good product for sure, but like taking that then to scale as a product is a whole other animal to deal with, and so it's and yeah, as you said, it's not cheap. But something that somebody mentioned to me, another friend in the cannabinoid industry, is that the R&D seems not to be priced into the product. Like seems like people are pricing their product on shelf just based on the cost of manufacturing versus the actual R&D. And you think is that something that you've kind of seen, or?
Yeah, and I think we're nearing levels of break even, if not at cost for a lot of these guys, if not a little bit less, and they're going to drive out these kind of small guys. You mentioned scale. I mean, even the really really large, kind of factory type players in this market are struggling at levels of when you're selling at $175 a kilo for winterized crude, and it's good product too. It's not like it's crappy product by any means. It's just it's hard to stay competitive in the current aspect. And I mean, you saw in a few different places. I'm sure we'd be kind of remiss. I'm sick of talking about it, but we'd be kind of remiss about saying, this whole pandemic thing going on. A lot of these brick and mortar stores weren't considered essential, or the brick and mortar kind of avenues for selling definitely went down. I mean, CBD, if you look at it, is a luxury product. I think these online type players had a little bit more of a less of a feel of it, but I think the industry as a whole definitely took a hit from that.
I mean, definitely the pandemic had an aspect of it to play in it. But do you think that's also because online sellers maybe can get I mean, it seems less and less now, but online sellers can kind of get away with a bit more in terms of like shipping over state lines or shipping into states that technically aren't legal. Uh,
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I think so. I think that's always been the case, but I don't think you can beat the brick and mortar. If I know nothing, if I were to recommend my mom to learn about something like this, I would send her into a brick and mortar store rather than read a website. So I think there's always a place for that in this market, especially with the education's such a huge piece to what we do, and at least that side of the market.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's definitely education, education, education. I mean, because we have to not only uh, uneducate them about things that they were previously educated about. We also have to like re-educate them about the plant as well in terms of like all the different cannabinoids. But then even just CBD alone is one cannabinoid, right? You were saying that like people's grandmothers are just now finding out about CBD, and just the difficulty of then adding on another cannabinoid to that batch. So actually, kind of on that note of you have like individual cannabinoids, but then like full spectrum or broad spectrum, are you seeing more like sales of just like isolates, and do you think that the market kind of in the future will be more like selling individual cannabinoids and maybe remixing, constituting them and putting them to market, or isolates, or do you think it'll be more like full spectrum, broad spectrum kind of stuff going to the market?
It's hard to tell. I'm not the operations manager at a big place, but if I were to say, I do think, kind of looking at other industries and just how the way the world is unfolded to this point, I think it will be more isolates and kind of focus on isolating different things, and then you can replicate kind of some of these, or kind of reverse engineer some of these broad spectrum ones. Whereas, every time you grow, from 1 acre to the next, so this is a good example I like to give people. You have a different cannabinoid profile. Your miners may be a little bit different. Whatever else is different, just who knows? There could have been a shady day where one day it was a cloud over here and one day it wasn't, and that has so much effect on a flowering plant that everything from the terpene profile to everything else in it it's not consistent, and that consistency of supply needs to be replicated. That's why I think you're going to see kind of these isolates come, because isolates as close as we're going to get basically on the market to 99.9% purity of something, where it's replicated every time. And if I buy isolate from company A and company B, it should be the same thing by its essence of what it is. So that's kind of where I think it is. I don't know where it's going to go though. I mean, I'm just the guys that do the price providing and the trading platform as well. So you tell me. I'm just the guy that's going to give you guys prices on it, hopefully.
I think that's a good point of view in terms of the consistency of a market, because like I'm sure there'll be people that are fully integrated and and have the whole supply chain in their business, but or vertically integrated. But definitely for those that are just like processing and selling into a market, the isolates will be by far the most like recreatable, because it's reproducible. It's just creating a full spectrum oil. That's an interesting kind of touch on that. And so actually, you mentioned terpenes. Is there the sale of terpenes going on at all in the hemp markets?
We're not touching anything on terpenes from PanXchange points. In terms of price providing or the trading platform itself. The price providing is kind of that's something I wanted to touch on too. You talked about the platform a little bit, and that is kind of what we are doing. What our main focus was to come in, but also it's to kind of do that new and nascent markets and bring them like a little bit of price transparency, which kind of one feeds into the next. We do derive our prices from the platform itself, from the sales and different things on the platform. So they're real tangible numbers. There's someone on the backside of this that bought and sold at this price or whatever it may be. And that's kind of where we've been hugely focused on this, pretty much from January is, we are in an oversupplied market. It's hard to get things done on the platform. Things are going a little bit slower than they were, let's say around harvest time last year for us. Whereas the prices they stay consistent. People need those. People need them for their financial models. People want to see, what our thoughts are going forward, and investors want to see it too. I mean, if I was an investor, I'd want to keep a pretty close thumb on the market.
Absolutely, yeah. It's in order to run a good business and have good business, you definitely need to be able to make predictions that are at least somewhat accurate, or be able to base your models so you can make a rational decision about your next steps versus just kind of like spitballing it into the future. So because you are relying on the sort of the membership to provide with the prices, right? How many members do you have on the hemp exchanges site?
It's just over 65 right now, and that's active members posting on there. So basically, we have that's buyers and sellers. That'd be everyone that'd be on the platform. We don't distinguish between one or the other. We have guys that do both, and we have guys that'll selectively do one or the other. But it's important to note that those prices are IOSCO compliant, which is the International Organization of Securities. And essentially, it's a weighted average. They have a certain way that you have to do it, but in layman's terms, it's a weighted average where the most weighted is going to be actual transactions that go down. That a little bit weighted less would be either bids or offers that that are live out there but don't quite get transacted on or don't get interacted with. And then the third one would be kind of a price assessment or what guys let us know, like a submission. But those are all vetted prices again, so it's important to know it's not just like any Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street being like, yeah, I paid $4 a pound for that stuff, and we all know the price isn't quite that anymore.
So are all those members like located pretty much in one area, or are you?
We're geographically agnostic, so we don't have any one area that's stronger than the other. Obviously, being in Denver, we do have a pretty big Colorado area. Same with Oregon. I think Colorado, Oregon, and then that Kentucky, Tennessee region are going to be your three main pillars in this business, especially for hemp. We did add the Northeast and the Great Plains, what we call the Great Plains, which is Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that kind of area. We are looking to expand a little bit further this year. We're kind of working on that now, but it's important to remember that, like I was just telling you there, you got to have the data behind it to print these numbers. I'm pretty wary and afraid to go out and only have 3-4 guys giving me numbers, and then I'm saying this is the new Southern California price, and whereas the next month I might not have the data there to support that. So that's important. We just want to make sure we're doing this slow and steady. It's not a big race to get to the finish line.
Seeing price variance across the country?
So we'd see it's important when you ask that if you're talking biomass or anything else. So biomass is the only one. Biomass is the only product that we're doing that's regionally tracked right now. We are looking to add a few others in the refined space, but for right now, refined products we're only doing in Colorado. Biomass, you're going to see the lowest prices right now in Oregon is what we've seen in that Pacific Northwest. And then we've seen a little bit higher prices in those newer states, whether that may be processors in those kind of newer states that are, saying, we'll pay up a little bit for that consistency of supply, like I was talking about earlier. The Northeast being one of them, and New York, your home state. We've talked to a couple guys that, they're able to do so. Again, with that, you still are having, you're able to maybe find some prices and kind of play that price arbitrage between the two and be able to ship. But the way shipping prices are right now and how low the cost of the commodity is, it doesn't make much sense to ship anything pretty far at all. You're going to be paying much more in freight than you will be for the actual product.
Do you think that the price is primarily just due to the quantity, or is there also a quality aspect of that?
There's definitely a quality issue to it. I think there's a lot of biomass in barns this year, or right now, as it's July. That it's just I'm not quite sure what the future of it holds, but right now it's not going to be usable or passable grade for some of these guys that are doing extraction. My best bet, if you're in that boat and you're listening to this, would be to pay, bite the bullet, just get it told, and get it into a form where you're not losing cannabinoid content by by passing. Like a crude or something like that's much more easily storable than having biomass in a super sack or in pellets or whatever it may be.
Yeah, the futures of it. So how? I mean, I know it's so challenging to kind of even try to predict this based on. I mean the like legal aspects of it, but if we were to take the legal aspects off the table, how long do you think it will be until the cannabinoid industry is at least stabilizing? Like,
I think everything comes in 3-4 year stints. And I mean, if you look at the Canada fiber market in the early 2000s, that's a pretty good comparison because they were allowed to grow for fiber in Canada. You saw huge oversupply, the price come down a bunch, and then it became a less sexy investment like everyone thought, and a lot of that kind of quick fleeting money that wanted to make a quick buck kind of exited the game, and you started to see the true players that really were like, okay, I'm here to make a consistent long-term business, and that's what we're trying to do. It seems like that's what you guys are trying to do, and I think as time goes on, you're going to see the people that are still in this. If let's say that the 2021 harvest, we're still looking at $1 a pound for biomass. You're really going to see the people who love what they do at that point. You're not going to see the big money suits and stuff like that. I think we'll exit, and you'll see a little bit more of that consistency that you're talking about. But I say it's hard to tell how long of a wave that's going to be, but I do think everything kind of moves in waves, and it's hard to envision it now. But I think there will be a period where you say, oh my gosh, we're so undersupplied right now. We need more investment. We need more companies. We need more, and that's just kind of how the ball works sometimes.
you never get the perfect amount that you need to get yourselves back on track.
Equilibrium like that, even though it is like a fleeting concept, when you do have different rules in different states. Smokable, for example. I mean, we just read about this in our newsletter the other day. Kentucky has a ban on smokable flower if you're in the state, but you can grow it there. So any Kentucky farmer can grow a smokable flower, but he can't sell it at a local shop. But yeah, he can take it to Kansas or something. I don't know if Kansas is actually allowed to do that, but you can take it to a neighboring state where you're allowed to do that. And that just doesn't make any sense. Come on.
So actually, in terms of the whole aspect of like shipping between states, I know ideally you don't want to ship it too far, but do you kind of, I mean, like help to guide your buyers and sellers in terms of like these are the laws that you have to deal with when you're shipping between states, or these are the laws, like this is what you can sell in terms of the Kentucky thing, this is what you can sell in this state, but if you want to sell this kind of product, you have to sell it in another state.
We're here to help any transaction that goes down on the platform. Let me make this clear. We're here to help you. I want to make sure that product gets all the way there. There's no issues with it on the way, and that the money changes hands, and we say, hey, let's do this again sometimes. And I'm here until we get to that point. I will say my biggest advice, if you are shipping, if you are shipping, I would likely deal with a company that's done this before and not try to just put it on any carrier that would take, TVs or ice cream or whatever else. You're going to want to deal with the guy that's dealt with hemp before. And you're going to want to have COAs, bills of lading, any sort of paperwork you can have to preemptively let any law enforcement know if the driver does have an issue and he does get pulled over. You can kind of preemptively address that and kind of say, look, officer, this is what this is. Here's all the paperwork to back it up. And that kind of allows him to probably make a better informed decision than if you were just kind of saying, hey, this is what it is, I promise, kind of thing.
Yeah, you got to make sure you travel with your paperwork, because as you said, there's so many people that just still don't really know much in that regard. So to kind of start wrapping it up here, what are, so again, the regulatory issues are a challenge, but what are some things that actually first, what, so you have currently 65 members on the exchange. I imagine when you're trying to grow into a new area, you actually put people on the ground and try to contact people in that location. What are kind of like the things you have to check mark off to make sure that you're gonna even go try to contact this company to bring them on the exchange? Like, what are the factors kind of playing into that? Like how
Size is a big one. We've there's been a few farmers, that are your guys that are doing, 50 plants or something like this, or 1 acre, and it's hard to transact on volumes that low because if you're not even filling a truckload up, it's just a little difficult. That's all. They're just different markets. Whereas we've seen more success almost on the bigger side of the quantity side of things, be more liquid than the guy that has a really good smokable flower, but he's only got 20 pounds of it or something like that, or he's got really nice biomass, but there's 1,000 pounds. It's just not quite enough to do it, and it's just a little bit harder to do things at that kind of smaller scale. It's just not quite built out that way. Even the guys with 100,000 pounds of biomass are struggling to move it. So definitely don't feel discouraged if that is you. But yeah, kind of some of the things when you're building out the market is how many transactions they're doing, what kind of player this is. We kind of touched on this earlier with the betting. Is this somebody I trust? And I do like having a smaller ecosystem, kind of where I am able to pick up the phone, check in with all the members. If we haven't talked to a guy in 2-3 months, or a girl in 2 or 3 months, and they haven't submitted prices organically, I'll likely check in with them, kind of see how they're doing. And we've seen some guys exit the scene either via financial woes, or that they just left their position at that company, and there's been a high turnover rate. So that's why I do like having that kind of smaller ecosystem. Whereas some of the other exchange kind of guys, some of the other services that are offered are kind of a little bit more of like a Craigslist ad or something, and it's anyone can go on there. And you mentioned that Wild Wild West thing, and that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid a little bit, is by having too many people where this thing has grown so now organically I can't even keep track of it anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's vitally important, especially in this early stages still of the industry, because you can really get feedback. So, what are again, not the regulations are a challenge, but what are some things that people that are in the market can actually do to help you as an exchange function better and give better utility to the market?
One of the main things that I have stressed to people, and this is, I kind of consider this to be like I'm the referee of a basketball game, and I'm not choosing sides here. I'm just kind of doing facilitating between one side or the other. And I want to stress to people that have either slyly or not so slyly complained to me that prices are low and what can we do to bring this up, and report prices to me. Tell me any transaction that goes down, especially one on the higher side, is something that I'm like a hungry hippo when it comes to the data on this stuff, man. We want to take as much as we can get and really disseminate that information. And it's important that that we're all kind of working on this as a community, and everyone's reporting prices as much as you can in order to get that price back up. If you want to see a change in prices and you're saying that printed price is really not where we're transacting 50 cents higher than that or whatever, I'm signing a contract. I know people now are and especially as plants are in the ground, trying to get their contracts all lined up for when harvest comes. And if they're doing it off a printed price, whether if it's us or a competitor of ours, it's important that you're having a dialogue with those kinds of people to say, okay, what can we do to get this up? How can I give you the information to let you make that play? Because it is the IOSCO price, and there's no way to really change it. As much as I wanted to, either way.
Absolutely. So yeah. So is there anything else that you want to kind of share to people that are out there that are, I mean, as we kind of discussed, like there are people that are just kind of worried about where the industry is at. There's lots of uncertainty still out there, even though there was a lot of enthusiasm early on. But then
Going to be enthusiasm, and there's a right reason to be enthusiastic. I mean, soybeans in this country didn't start until after World War II, and now that's one of the largest commodities we have. We're the largest exporter in the world of soybeans, and it's cool to see kind of a similar market maturation, but it's happening over 2-3 years, and things are moving just so fast. I'd say just don't get discouraged, and I mean I bet you soybean farmers in the 1920s probably were like, what the hell's going on? So it's kind of a similar situation, and there's a lot of room to grow still. It is a little weird though, going from, soybeans weren't illegal before that point though. So it is a little weird kind of seeing that. And we were talking fiber earlier, and I mean, there's certain things you can kind of relearn from the past, but there's certain things where, maybe decortication via a horse-drawn buggy isn't the way we need to do things this way. But that's like the last bit of information that we have on things, etc. And you can kind of draw different parallels like that where, there's things we can learn from the past of, one of the biggest crops we have in this country. And there's things we can kind of say, okay, that's in the past. Now we're here. We can move forward.
Yeah, definitely the amount of data that we have from the past, yeah, but it's kind of unusable now because I mean hemp missed the science and technology boom, and so like there's just all these new things that are out here. So you touched on, I just want to touch on this a little bit more because it's kind of fascinating because it's not happening, or at least from my appearance, it's not just happening in the markets in terms of like prices, but it's also happening in terms of like scientific development. Is that you said that the growth is kind of compressed into such a short timeline versus like the growth of a market maybe like 50 years ago, right? Like soybeans or something. Do you think that's just because of like the internet and having access to all these communications and be able to like get that up and going or up and running quicker, or do you think it's just the matter that this is like we've been waiting for so long and this is just now being accepted into the market, and so like it's just exploding?
The second one, I think it's a little bit more of a gunpowder keg that, it got lit up a little bit too quickly with a lot of money and a lot of hype. I mean, we were fortunate enough to have a really good media campaign last fall where our CEO, Julie Lerner, she actually wrote an article called The 7 Steps of Market Maturation through JP Morgan. Correct. It's through JP Morgan's Center of Commodities. So if anyone wants to look that up after that, she does kind of discuss it in a little bit more detail. But, we were fortunate enough to have a good media run, and the media, the national media, even including CNBC, kind of these money markets and everything, love talking about it. And that's why you kind of have this gunpowder keg that I think just grew a little bit too quickly. We got a little bit too heavy, and now we're sitting down and we're kind of getting back up to get back on our feet here. And hopefully we can do that sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Alex. It's a pleasure to really talk about the markets and where they're going, just because we want to get it out of that Wild West phase, right? We want it to be a mature business and actually functioning. But yeah, so have yourself a wonderful day.
Cool. Yeah. Hopefully everyone had a good 4th of July. And, we're all back to
Thank you for joining us on the NYHIA network. If you enjoyed the video or you found it helpful, please like and subscribe below. If you're interested in growing the hemp industries here in the United States, please join us at the HIA at joinhemp.org and make sure you check off your state chapter during sign up. If you want to find any of the links that we have below, they're in the description. And please comment to let us know what you want to learn next. Thank you very much for joining us, and have yourself a wonderful day.